Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the motion before us. And Mr. Speaker, for many, many years, given my history and involvement in sports, I have longed to see a day such as what we are experiencing here today. I know that as former sports minister, as former sports personality, as former sports administrator, that yes, programs are vital. Facilities, as has been said on their own, do not make for development of sports. However, to ensure that you can accommodate your programs, facilities are necessary. And I think given what has been accomplished by our sportsmen and women in this country, they more than deserve an upgrade in the facilities that they have to apply their craft on. And so, Mr. Speaker, I fully support this injection of a significant amount of resources for the upgrade of playing facilities. I've had the experience from working in the Department of Youth Development and Sports. I've had the experience as a minister of government. I've had the experience as a sportsman. We know, and we cannot pretend about it, that normally, generally speaking, sports is not the highest priority on any government's agenda. Very often, when budget time comes around and government is giving priority in terms of allocation of resources, the social services and sports tend to be the bastard children. And so I'm very pleased, I am extremely proud to be part of a government that has recognized the significance of sports, the contribution that sports has made, and the contribution that sports can make in our national development, and to invest. And that is what is being done here. An investment is being made in the future of our people in this country by making such a large chunk of resources available for the development of sporting facilities and sporting programs. Mr. Speaker, I commend the Honorable Prime Minister, Minister of Finance. I commend the Minister of Youth Development and Sports. And having been a minister myself, I don't know how to say this, but I rather suspect this will be the sports minister with the most outstanding track record when it comes to delivery in terms of sports facilities and programs. Mr. Speaker, I sat here and I listened to another former sports minister. And sometimes I have to say to you, a little jealousy comes in. I sat there and I listened to the programs and facilities outlined by the Prime Minister, and a little jealousy creeps in, and that's understandable. But we must rise above that and give credit where credit is due. And so, I listened to some fallacious statements being made by the immediate past Minister of Sports. And it is incumbent upon me, knowing better, to make a few corrections in my delivery. But before I do so, let me just say that the fact that a number of facilities for a number of different sporting disciplines are being established is commendable. We know historically that cricket is one of our more popular sports and traditionally one of the most played sports. Soccer has become the most popular sport. But we know too that track and field forms the basis for every other sporting discipline, and it is one of the sporting disciplines that is more readily playable by every young man and woman. And if you have a good foundation in track and field, then you can launch into any other sporting discipline much easier than those who don't. And so when I hear of the football facilities that are going to be established, and I hear about the synthetic tracks that are going to be established, I am elated. We now have one track, 400-meter track in St. Lucia, which is being underutilized because of the fact that our St. Jude Hospital is being housed there. It is my fervent hope that as soon as the St. Jude's Hospital is completed and the hospital is relocated to its original home, that we can take a look at that facility, the George Odlum Stadium, to rehabilitate it, to bring it back to what it once was. Having said so, given the kind of investments that we are making on sporting facilities, I just want to express one of my concerns as a person who has paid attention to sports over the years. And this is what I consider to be a sin that administration after administration has been guilty of. We expend tremendous amount of resources, especially in our national facilities like the Darren Sammy Stadium, the George Odlum Stadium, the Mindo Phillip Park, and so on. And we have a very poor record when it comes to maintenance of those facilities, resulting in exorbitant output of finances every time we have to do major repairs. Another problem I see is the type of material that we use in the construction of our facility. We are not oblivious to the kind of environment within which we exist. We are an island surrounded by seawater. As a result, Mr. Speaker, our facilities are subject to sea blast. The sea blast does a number, especially where we have a lot of metal exposed. Corrosion takes place, and we find ourselves having to do repairs as a result of this, almost on a 5-year basis, or even less than that. Now, I ask myself, I say to myself that we should take stock of that fact and determine what can we do to avoid that situation and save some money in the process. By that I mean, for example, Darren Sammy Stadium will be repaired, the George Odlum Stadium will be repaired. I would like to strongly suggest to our engineers, our architects, and the contractors and technical people involved that they take another look at the kind of material that they're using to do the repairs. I recently took a look at the facility in Dominica, for example, and I noticed there's a lot more concrete in that facility than there is in ours. We have a lot more metal that is exposed to the sea blast. And so as a result, our deterioration takes place at a far more rapid rate. So that may be one of the things you want to consider, the kind of material that we use in the construction of our facilities. And I'm hoping too, that as we embark on the establishment of those new facilities, we take those factors into account. Now, I'm no expert, no technical expert, so I cannot speak to what is the more ideal material also, but I'm hoping that this is taken into consideration, and those who know better can make recommendations to minimize the cost of maintenance and the expenses that we have to do with regular repairs. Having said so, Mr. Speaker, I come to the subject of the type of surfaces that we establish. Now, you would have heard, based on what the member from Soufrière said, based on what the Prime Minister said, that some of the facilities are going to be synthetic artificial surfaces. You heard the criticism from the member from Denry North about his concerns about the use of artificial surfaces. Now, let me say this. I once shared that concern because in another time, at another place, given what I did, I was exposed to those surfaces. And well, let me just say, as a person in the field of sports medicine, one of the aspects of my profession involved on-site, on-field presence while a game is taking place in case there is any form of injury. One of the things that was noticed, and in North America, if you look at the statistics back then, you would recognize that there was a high incidence of joint injuries, especially knees and ankles, because of the use of artificial surfaces. That is because when you use natural grass, there's more give. By that I mean, if you suddenly come to a halt, or you suddenly make a twist, the grass would shift, the soil would shift with the grass, and so that sudden immediate stop would not transfer that torque to the joint, causing injury. With the artificial surface, you just have a sudden shift or a sudden resistance to the twist that you try to do. And so, that's previously. And so the torque that would result in the amount of pressure being applied to the joint would cause those joint injuries. And so joint injuries were prevalent as a result of the use of artificial turf. The next thing is, it was mentioned by the member for Denry North too, is the fact that when it is summertime in North America, it gets quite hot, similar to what we experience here in the Caribbean. And the surface becomes very heated. And if there is a situation where an athlete falls, or his exposed body slides across the surface, there would be abrasions that would be severe to the point where it gets second-degree burns from the surface. Mr. Speaker, these are legitimate concerns. However, those concerns have been taken into account by the companies who manufacture and utilize those surfaces. And I have to say that very, very advanced development and true technology has taken place as far as that is concerned, and those situations have been addressed to a very large extent. So much so that there are different materials that are used along with the synthetic grass to cause cooling, to maintain lower temperatures. The next thing is that the grass mimics to a great extent natural grass. And so you have a situation where it is almost similar to what happens with natural grass when you suddenly stop or you make sudden turns and so on. And these are actually tested, and they can give you the results of those tests in terms of the extent to which, or the amount of torque that you will receive from sudden stops, sudden turns, and so on, and what are the safety limits and so on. So that has been addressed, and to my satisfaction and my relief, and I'm satisfied that we can use the artificial turf without those concerns. The concern, however, is maintenance. Because while we are expending so much, I am concerned that very often, as a small, poor nation, our actions does not reflect the fact that we are poor. And so, given our limited resources, I believe that we have to, at all times, be strategic in trying to do the most that we can with the little that we have. When you look at a grass surface, those who know what it entails to keep a grass surface up to a high standard will tell you that is a very expensive undertaking. Take, for example, our premier facilities such as the Darren Sammy Stadium. To maintain the green grass that you see there, go to the stadium, and despite what previous sports ministers say when they just assume office about it is negligence on the part of this minister or that minister, they end up in the same situation themselves. Go and find out what is Wasco's bill to Darren Sammy Stadium. It entails a lot of maintenance that with the utilization of a lot of water, which can become expensive, and if you're using water at a commercial rate, that becomes exorbitant. The other thing is, Mr. Speaker, you have to fertilize, you have to do all kinds of testing, you have to curate it on a regular basis and so on. And so it is not an easy task. And I'm sure even Mr. Crafton, who is highly rated as the member for Denry North said, will tell you it is a challenge to maintain it at the level that it is. Can we reasonably expect that at the community level, we will have the competence, the professional resources, the financial resources, and the wherewithal to maintain those facilities at that level? My sincere answer to you, Mr. Speaker, is no. And so, given the fact that our resources are limited, both in terms of professionalism and financial, we have to look at the best possible scenario where we can have facilities of a high standard with minimum maintenance. And that is where the artificial turf comes in with the football field. Okay. The facilities that we are currently looking at, Mr. Speaker, I happen to have been fortunate to have been invited by the Minister for Youth Development and Sports to accompany him on some familiarization tours where we visited not just the facilities, but we visited the companies who manufacture the facilities, where they explain the technology and everything behind it. And I'm saying to you that the maintenance is far less than what is required for the maintenance of grass to have a proper surface. And Mr. Speaker, that is the kind of approach I want to see by a prudent, responsible government to maximize the use of the limited resources that we have for the benefit of our people. And so I do not share the member for Dennery North's concerns as far as that is concerned. Now, I share one of his concerns, though, Mr. Speaker. He spoke about a foreigner, and I don't like to use this word, foreigner. And for personal reasons, I tend to refrain from the use of the word foreigner. My mother was a Monstratian who lived in St. Lucia for 40-something years and was being referred to as a foreigner every time she had a disagreement with the neighbors. And so that word does not sit well with me. But let us look at what is being said here. I believe in checking for our own and developing our own where it is possible before we reach out and bring in outside expertise. That is what I'm saying. I support that view. However, to say that, first of all, that Mr. Lockerbie, and that is the foreign concern that is being referred to say that Mr. Lockerbie is being given $24 million to take care of those facilities, that is not true. And every single member in this chamber, Mr. Speaker, including yourself, I would go as far as to say, know that that is not the case. Mr. Lockerbie is a consultant who has carried out a study for us, delivered a study, and his role would be to oversee and coordinate the implementation of the project and solicit the involvement of the foreign companies. And the foreign companies that will come here to work, let me just say, are foreign companies that will be working on the artificial surfaces. Where surfaces are natural, locals will do it. And even where artificial surfaces will be established, there are preparatory work that is to be done. Once it can be done by locals, it will be done by locals. And so I'm saying to you, Mr. Speaker, from my knowledge, we have allocated $24 million for the project. I can tell you at least $20 million will be spent in facilities, in establishing the facilities, and a lot of that will go down to the benefit of locals. So I understand the politics involved in trying to mislead people. But in this honorable house, we have to do the honorable thing and tell the people like it is. Do not mislead the people. Now, Mr. Speaker, there are many other areas in which people are being misled in this honorable house. We are being told that the facilities are being established at the expense of community facilities. Mr. Speaker, these are community facilities that are being upgraded and enhanced. You heard a proud member for Soufrière Saint-Jacques talk about his mini stadium and what is going to happen. Yes, I'm a little envious, but my turn will come. As long as this government is in office, I am very confident that the turn of Grosile will come to have facilities just as good or even better. But Mr. Speaker, the facility he is referring to is an existing facility at the community level. You may not want to call it a community facility anymore because of the standard that it will be raised to. I doubt the people of Soufrière will want to just relinquish the community facility just because of the high standard and say it is no longer a community facility. It is a community facility that is being brought up to international standard. Are you saying that the community does not deserve that? So, you know, when we try to mislead people, you fool the people once, you fool them twice, you fool them three. You cannot fool the people all the time. You have to tell the people the truth. Mr. Speaker, the facilities we're talking about that are abandoned and all of that. Mr. Speaker, let me just say this to you. As a sports personality, as a former sports personality, I believe that sporting facilities have to be provided for everyone. But let us be real. In 238 square miles, the Prime Minister mentioned how many facilities we have? 50, 150, over 100 facilities in 238 square miles. That is absurd. That is ridiculous. Let us be real. It is small wonder that they are in the condition that they are. We cannot afford to maintain 150 facilities. So as you're telling me, are you telling me that every 20 individuals in this country must have their own playing field and their own multipurpose court? So Grosile has one, Massad has one, Cap Estate has one. That is ridiculous. I have lived in metropolitan countries, Mr. Speaker, where I participated in sports. In Germany, I had to take 2 trains to go to the stadium where I did my track and field. In New Jersey, I had to take a bus to go to the stadium where I practiced my track and field. But in St. Lucia, we want to walk out of our door and onto a playing facility. That's not on. That is not on. There's nowhere that is far in St. Lucia. So if you're going to have all those facilities in major communities, how many major facilities do you need in a community? You see, this is where our problem lies. We have to stop fooling people and playing politics. I can play the politics of giving every minor community in my constituency a playing facility, and then what? I cannot maintain it, they cannot maintain it, and all you have is what he referred to, abandoned facilities. Well, you know what? We're going to do what is right by the people. As leaders, even when the people demand what you know is not feasible, what you know is not sustainable, what you know is not right, you have to stand up, even if it is at a cost, and say to them, that is not real. Let us look at things logically and do things properly. And that is what is being done under my colleague minister with this upgrade of the sporting facilities and the sporting programs. Now, I will tell you, I'm hoping, I'm longing, awaiting that this program will be implemented as soon as possible. Because as soon as it is done, then we're looking at phase 2. And that is where I'm going to put my pressure for Grosile. I accept Grosile is not getting anything. This is a national facility. The school is... Pardon? No, the school is what we're getting. And it's a national facility. We'll share it with the rest of the country just like we do at Darren Sammy Stadium. So I'm saying, Mr. First, we are better off at the moment than many other communities. I mean, look at the Grosile playing field. That is of a far higher standard than many other facilities. So I do not begrudge Miku, pardon? Of a better standard, yeah. So I do not begrudge Miku South. I do not begrudge Denry or Soufre if they get in their facility upgraded before me. It's just like I don't expect them to say anything when I get my roads upgraded before them. You have to give and take. But, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to the second phase, when we'll be reaching out to other communities, so that at the end of the day, when you travel north, south, east, or west, you will have at your disposal facilities that are of a high standard, and so that even our local domestic competition can be played on facilities that are worthy of the sportsmen and women that we're trying to produce in this country. Mr. Speaker, okay. Mr. Speaker, it was also said that there's no maintenance. Oh, the concern was that there'll be no maintenance of community facilities at the community level. And if had that been true, that would be a legitimate concern. Let me just say this. We are not just embarking, as was intimated, on a program to improve facilities. There will be programs to go with the structures. It is not just projects, it is projects and programs. We understand that very well. We understand that very well. And so, Mr. Speaker, at the community level, we will have those major national facilities like the swimming pool and the synthetic tracks and so on that may be maintained by Sports St. Lucia or what have you. But at the local level, we have the local government who will be given an allocation to ensure that they maintain the playing facilities. And I think for too long, we have not paid due recognition to the role of local government and empowering them sufficiently to take care of their affairs at the community level. Everything should not be centralized. And I know what it is like for us as parliamentary representatives, that everybody comes to us and, we are God Almighty and everything to everybody. Yes, that's good politics, but it is not good community development. It is not good development of leadership at the community level, and as a result, the national pool of leaders will suffer. So if we can begin to make people take responsibility, two things happen. One, it is more efficient, they take more pride in what is theirs, and they ensure that they defend it, they protect it, and they maintain it. So empowering local government will ensure that those facilities are taking place. And I'm pleased to say that the Ministry of Finance has just made an allocation of $100,000 to the various constituency councils for the purpose of maintaining local playing facilities. Now, Mr. Speaker. Pardon? Yeah, well, your council will not get 100,000. You'll have all kinds of subventions in Castro City Council. So don't ask for more. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, I'm also pleased. The member for Miku North mentioned the fact that it is lamentable that as an island, so many of us cannot swim. Now, when I speak of sports, understand it, perhaps that has something to do with my stage in age. Before, I was all about elite sports. I understand now that a few of our people will make it to the international level and become elite sportsmen and women. And we have to aspire towards that because of the exposure it gives to our country, the pride that it brings to our people, and the economic benefit that can be derived from this. However, there are other aspects of sports. And while a career in professional sports does a lot for us as a nation, we have to understand a wider base community sporting involvement is an asset to us as a country. We have to look at sports for leisure. We have to look at sports for socialization. We have to look at sports for community development, and we have to look at sports for health and fitness reasons. Mr. Speaker, we know the situation with regard to sedentary lifestyle diseases that our people are faced with. Physical activity, one of which is sports. Most enjoyable, I would dare say, form of physical activity is sports, will go a long way in alleviating the problems that we face with diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, hypertension, and so on. And we know how this wreaks havoc in our society. Not only is it expensive because people who survive those conditions are on permanent medication, which is a cost. Many of them suffer debilitating illnesses like stroke and so on, and they, rather than be productive citizens, and I hate to say they become a burden on the family and the state, but that is the reality. And so if we're going to avert those situations, we would have done ourselves a world of good as far as that is concerned. And so one of the other aspects that we're looking at is the establishment of a number of swimming pools. And I heard the member from Miku North talk about her swimming pool. The member for Soufrière talk about the swimming pool. Well, we already have one in the north. But when we have all those swimming pools strategically located around the island, that makes for the possibility of having island-wide swimming programs where everyone can learn to swim. Now, that is a life skill, Mr. Speaker. Forget about whether you ever become a competitive swimmer. If you can swim, apart from being able to save yourself if you find yourself in water that goes above your head, it is also a good form of exercise for the average citizen. As we get older, some of us pay the price for what we did in our younger years. We have all kinds of joint injuries and so on. So it may become a little difficult for some to jog, especially if you're going to be jogging on hard surfaces. It may become a little difficult to cycle and so on. Swimming becomes one of the options as a form of exercise. And so I highly welcome this new development where we're going to have all those swimming pools around the island. Now, I mean, you know, sometimes, you know, the strategies, the techniques that politicians use is so amazing and it's so transparent that it's laughable. The member for Denry North talked about he don't come here to beat his chest and so on, and in the same breath he said they're responsible for starting the process for a swimming pool in the north. Now, if I were to follow suit and copy his example, I would say to you, when he became minister, there was a piece of land in the BOSL area earmarked for a swimming pool that was transferred to the Swimming Association, and that happened during the administration of the United Workers' Party. Nothing has happened there, but I'm hoping, now I'm speaking here now as a parliamentary representative, because you see, a previous parliamentary representative by the name of Mario Michel, Justice Mario Michel, that he is today, under his watch as Minister of Sports, the stadium was built, the Darren Sammy Stadium. And I recall, because I pay attention to those things, that back in the day he said that he wanted the area to become a sporting complex. And a certain member who is now in this house was part and parcel of all this planning and so on. He was then a permanent secretary, and I remember the plan was to utilize the infrastructure that was already there to put in additional sporting facilities. Mr. Speaker, I think that was an excellent plan. I still think it is an excellent plan. So they went ahead and did an indoor facility that is there currently. When I became sports minister, we did the tennis center, which is there presently. Well, there's a minister of sports who probably didn't support the view and did nothing. But I'm hoping that this minister of sports will recognize the validity of that idea, and will establish a swimming pool in that area. And hopefully, in the second phase, a football facility and track will be established there as well. We have the population to justify it, plus what is already the four-phase current, the parking and everything there justifies that kind of investment in that area. So much for my pitch for the next phase for my constituency. Mr. Speaker, some statements were made that are unfortunate. Now, in trying to take praise and lay blame, we have to be careful that we do not misrepresent the facts. The member for Denry North said, and he gave an example to substantiate his point. He said, for example, that Dalton Polius had not received assistance from the government of St. Lucia, and that he was turned down when he sought assistance from the government of St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, I did not want to interrupt him and to stand up and object, but I'm saying to you, Mr. Speaker, that that was a false statement. Mr. Speaker, since I became parliamentary representative for Grosley this term, Mr. Dalton Polius has had reason to come to me for assistance, and he received assistance. Mr. Speaker, if you wish, I don't want to make my phone a document of the House, but I have here a WhatsApp message from Mr. Dalton Polius. Thanks for the assistance, Mr. Montoute. I booked my flight and I will be leaving on Monday. That was sent to me on June 29th, 2018. Now, how does that stack up against what was said? I don't know. But let me tell you what the truth is now, Mr. Speaker. This same Dalton Polius, when I was sports minister, I recognized the talent in him, and we embarked upon a program called the Elite Athletes Program. And one aspect of that program was to take some of those elite athletes, provide them with employment. So they would go to the schools and do some coaching and inspirational and motivational speeches and so on, and that they would schedule their timetable themselves to facilitate their training and their travels. And when they come back to St. Lucia, they go back to the sports ministry and they have a job. He fired that same member for Denry North, became sports minister subsequently, and fired every one of them, including the same Dalton Polius that he's advocating for right now. Mr. Speaker, that is the truth. That is the reality. So when people are beating their chest, you let them do it sometimes because, you just don't want to engage, in those kind of things. Now, Mr. Speaker, and to talk about athletes who do not get support from the government, Mr. Speaker, the cabinet of the United Workers' Party, headed by the Honorable Prime Minister, the Honorable Alan Chasney, met last month or 2 months ago, and approved economic costs for a young man by the name of Jonel Eugene because he is a national sports personality, he is a national cricketer. They endorsed economic costs, that kind of support for him to go to the University of the West Indies to pursue his studies. Now this Jonel Eugene, he has pedigree, Mr. Speaker. He is the son of John Eugene. John Eugene, one of our outstanding cricketers in this country, one of the most talented cricketers that I have ever seen. The best cricketer never to play test.
What constituency is
he? He comes from the constituency of Groseley. Mr. Speaker, John Eugene has captained West Indies B before Darren Sammy. This was the individual who had gone the furthest. Recognizing his talent, his passion and involvement, after his heyday in cricket, he got involved in coaching. He got involved in coaching. He got involved in coaching. He was during your time. He was during your time. He got involved in coaching, Mr. Speaker. Started his own academy, John Eugene Cricket Academy. I saw the ambition, the passion, and the involvement of the young man. I put him in the league of people like Stuart Charles. Where Stuart Charles, in his case, it's football. These people breathe, talk, work, everything is about their sport. I said we cannot waste that talent. We brought him into the Ministry of Youth and Sports as a cricket coach. The fact that I brought him in, and he's from my constituency, and I tell you truthfully, Mr. Speaker, I had no clue what the man's politics is. I suspect what it was then. But that was not a criteria for me. And so I ignored that, and we brought him in because of his ability as a coach. But because that was done, the interpretation was that he is one of mine. As soon as the member for Dennery South, the member for Dennery South brought him back, sorry. As soon as the member for Dennery North became sports minister, he was fired as a coach. Wow. Thankfully, there's a member from Dennery South who is now sports minister. He is back in the ministry. That is what your record is. Don't come here beating your chest and playing as if, well,
Holier than thou.
Yes. So, now, he also spoke about Crafton and Martinez, two outstanding curators. I want you to hear that member for ancillary. Through you, Mr. Speaker. Two outstanding curators, because you're familiar with those gentlemen. I know they are your friends. You know their politics too. That is not for me to look about. I made a pledge on my platform that I will be the UWP candidate, but a Groseley representative, and I will represent every individual in my constituency. Mr. Speaker, when the UWP administration was in office, with all the proclamations about locals and pushing locals and everything like that, I, as sports minister, was threatened when I decided for the 2007 World Cup, Cricket World Cup. No, sorry. 2007 Cricket World Cup, the preparations were done before my time. When I came, everything was in place. 2010 Cricket World Cup. That's not how we operate. And that is not because I didn't know his politics, Mr. Speaker. That is not because I didn't know his politics. I did not fire the member for Castro South. We do things based on merit, based on ability, and I've said so before. He was doing a good job, so I kept him. Mr. Speaker, I was told, however, by the member for Castro South, who was then CEO, no, not CEO of World Cup Cricket, that I had to engage a firm called Terraformer out of Trinidad. I don't tell tales out of schools, you know. When I call names too when I say what I'm saying, because I can substantiate what I'm saying. I was told that I had to engage a firm called Terraformer out of Trinidad to do the ground preparation for 2010 World Cup. I said, hell no. We have a young man in St. Lucia who has been acclaimed in the region, has been outstanding, has been very competent, very capable. I said, these are the opportunities we must give them to better themselves so that today, a member from Delray North can say he's one of the best in the world.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, Mr. Speaker.
We gave the contract
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order. Mr. Speaker. The member, no, on a point of order, the member is misleading the House, and the member can say a lot, and we can laugh and joke about it. Mr. Speaker, I became tournament director for the ICC World T20, Mr. Speaker. Thereafter, I left to become CEO of the West Indies Cricket Board. There was a tournament director, a gentleman from Jamaica, that finalized the arrangements for the hosting of the World T20. And for the honorable member to say, I had asked him to give a firm Terraformer to do the curating, and he chose somebody. The records will tell you that Crafton was chosen by me and introduced to regional international curating by me. I had no part in choosing who it is that did preparations for the ICC World T20. By then, I had become the Chief Executive Officer of the West Indies Cricket Board. If the member, and it's something I will speak of when I make my presentation, says for Cricket World Cup, I was very instrumental in choosing Terraformer, and I will explain to the Honorable House why they were chosen and the process that was followed. But certainly, for the World T20 in 2010, that cannot be true. And I just want, Honorable Member, your narrative may sound very beautiful and convincing, but I think you have the dates mixed up.
Honorable Member, very well, very well. Member for Grocery, I think the objection by the member from Castries South, he's saying that you may have your dates wrong.
Mr. Speaker, I am guided by your advice. I do not wish to engage in a back and forth where I say this, he says that, and none of us have any documentary evidence of it. So, however, I assure you that under my watch, when it came to choosing a curator to prepare for the 2010 World Cup, it was Crafton who was the person chosen, despite the fact that Terraformer was recommended as the company to do it. I insisted that if a local can do it, a local would do it. And that is what was done. Crafton was given the contract to prepare the entire playing facility. He was given the contract to prepare the entire facility. And that is documented, and you can check it for yourself. And so, Mr. Speaker, when we talk about, locals and so on, Mr. Martinez Avril, who was mentioned here today, and I don't normally bring up names unless the name is already on the table. That's a grass. Mr. Martinez Avril, another individual from my constituency, and that had nothing to do with the fact that he was from my constituency, it had everything to do with his competence. Ask him, who introduced him into the arena of field preparation in this country? You remember there was a playing field in Castries near the Fiji airport. They called it SAB. You know why? There was not a blade of grass on that facility. Under my watch as minister, we upgraded that facility to become one of the finest surfaces in Castries. And so, Mr. Speaker...
Honorable Member, please be advised you have 15 minutes in which to come.
I will take less than that, sir. I know what I'm saying. It does not go down well with some. It is a hard pill to swallow, and they wish that I come to an end as fast as possible. I will relieve those who are stressed as soon as I can. Mr. Speaker, and I want to say to you that even today, this very individual continues to do work on playing facilities on playing surfaces in this country. For the Windward Island School Games, Mr. Minister, if I'm not mistaken, and for other work. So it is not as if and when you see the members on the other side, Mr. Speaker, call a name, there's reason behind it, you know. There is reason behind it. You have to be thoroughbred, no impurities, no doubt, no questions. You have to be read to the core for them to recognize you or accept you. However, those same individuals find favor with us. You know why? A St. Lucian is a St. Lucian. We are here to represent St. Lucians based on merit and ability. Not based on politics. Not based on politics. Not based on politics. And so, Mr. Speaker, I stand here today proud to be associated. And you know, the minister has to remind me that I'm no longer Minister of Sports. But when you look at this cabinet, the member from Denry North talked of his exploits in his time as someone who wore national colors. But when you look at this cabinet, you have a prime minister who is a former sports personality. So when you approach him on the question of sports, you know, he has no choice. You have a member for Castries North who was a former sports minister, you know, avid table tennis player. You have a member for Babono, former national footballer, you know. Mr. Speaker, you have a minister of sports. You have a minister of sports who's a former national athlete. I mean, when you look at the people in this cabinet, they have to be sensitive, and those who did not make it to the national level had their involvement in sports. I know the member for Castries Southeast is an avid Ulelaba player. You know? So, Mr. Speaker, the sports, you know, the sportsmen and women will be well represented by this government. And we ask that the members on the other side recognize our effort, support our effort, and do what is right by the youth of this country. And, oh yes. And Mr. Speaker, what is happening today is historic. I can see the transformation. I can see already the fillip that sports as a whole in this country will receive. Mr. Speaker, there are a number of programs, I'm not sports minister, but there are a number of programs under my ministry that will heavily rely on the establishment of those facilities and the program that are in the Ministry of Youth Development and Sport. When I talk about my after-school program, one significant aspect of the after-school program is sports. Mr. Speaker, when I talk about clubs and community development, which is a responsibility of my ministry, a significant aspect of it will come from the sporting programs of the Department of Youth Development and Sports. And so I am excited from many perspectives, as minister, as parliamentary representative, as an individual, as a St. Lucian, you know, and as a father who probably did not play my role sufficiently well because of my involvement in politics with my children. I look forward to my grandchildren having a career in sports because of the rich heritage that would have been provided for them by those who have gone before them, and that they'll be encouraged to participate in sports because of what is being done right now. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to not just those facilities being established, but the ancillary structures like changing rooms, because the Prime Minister and the Minister of Sports have said that they want the facilities and the sports that are concentrated upon to be gender neutral, meaning that they want the ladies to participate in sports. Mr. Speaker, if you have a sporting facilities as fine as it is, you cannot ask a lady to show up at a sporting facility and have to change in the open. You cannot ask a lady, neither a gentleman, who wants to ease themselves to do it in the open. The people who come as spectators, who support the sporting events, we can't ask them to do that. So we're going to ensure that we establish the requisite facilities to create the ideal environment, the enabling environment that will ensure that sports grow from strength to strength, and that the impact that sports can have, sports will have, not just on economics, not just on careers, not just on health, not just on leisure, social, but even on crime. Mr. Speaker, I commend this program that is being undertaken. I fully support this program, and I want to ask that this House give this program the thumbs up with all our hearts, because we are doing justice, we are doing good by this generation and future generations to come. I thank you.